Hi, this is Tiffany Cole for week 6 of Introduction to Public Speaking. This week we are giving an informative speech, and I have chosen to talk about the history of my hometown, which is Lima, Ohio. Now, Lima, Ohio is at the top of Ohio. It's right by the Ottawa River. Here's a map of Lima, Ohio. We're about 95 miles north of Columbus, Ohio, which is the state capital. We were founded in 1831 and named by Patrick Good. We were originally a black swamp turned into a small village that was a Indian settlement. So the first recorded citizen here was Absalom Brown, and the first recorded child born here was Miriam Mitchell Brown. The town was small but industrious and slowly growing until 1885, when a big part of our history here is a businessman named Benjamin Farott. Benjamin Farott was looking for natural gas. He was digging around in different areas that he owned, and he accidentally found some oil. And he looked at the oil and decided that it wasn't worth anything. So he went ahead and leased the land out to Mandeville Company, who came in and they tested the oil and they decided, yes, that was very good oil. So they began digging wells. The oil was second to none in the world for the richness, or I'm not sure what makes the oil great. So they brought in 1,500 new residents within less than a year, and by 2 years later, they had over 300 wells dug in the Lima area. So oil became kind of what made this town big. According to Henry Howe, the oil field was sold then to John Rockefeller, who came in and built 2 new oil refineries. And that contributed to the locomotive business here in Lima, Ohio. According to the Lima Historical Society, the locomotive works was part of what made Lima famous. They made more shade-geared locomotives than anywhere else in the world. The man who originally found the oil, Benjamin Franklin, we'll come back to him. He helped this town out a lot. He did lose out on the oil then, obviously. He could have made a lot of money on the oil. So that was a bad business call, but he had done other things for this town here. So he actually came here and incorporated a bank, and the bank was National Deposit Bank, which then became known as the Allen County Bank, and he was the president, and he used that bank and the money to back his business ventures here in Lima, which kept Lima growing and kept us up to date with everything that was going on in the world. So he brought us the famous Opera House in 1881, so this was just before he had found the oil. And the Opera House was so grand that some New York investors had come here and they loved it so much. They went back to New York and modeled several other opera houses off of our opera house that we have here. And the Opera House had attracted famous singers and comedians, one of them being Lenny Bruce, and he actually did a skit about Lima, Ohio. He actually hated Lima, Ohio. Farott also built the first electric plant right across the street, actually, from the Opera House. And according to the Allen County Historical Society, he used this plant to electrify street railway, making Lima one of the first cities in the country to have this mode of transportation. It wasn't until 1890 when Farott was actually trying to build railways from Columbus, Ohio, all the way up to Saratoga, Michigan, that George Ford came from Washington, D.C. to check on the Allen County Bank. And when he got here, he found that not only had Farouk overextended his credit, he was actually using dummy money to hide the fact that he had overextended his credit. And then the government shut down the bank, and Farouk actually went bankrupt. He lost the electric plant, and we no longer have an electric plant, and then he actually lost the streetcars as well. So we don't have streetcars anymore either. That was obviously for a very brief time. Nobody bought them after he had lost them in the bankruptcy. He then actually sold the Opera House then to John D. Rockefeller, and Rockefeller leased it out to the Warner Bros., who just used it for storage, and currently it is empty. After it was used for storage, there wasn't much done with it, and it became just another abandoned building downtown. After this, a few years later, in 1918, there was a great flood in Lima, Ohio. Hundreds of people lost their homes, and the flood caused, a lot of damage. So the downtown, some of the downtown buildings were able to be restored, and they rebuilt them up, or fixed them, whatever was wrong with them. But most of the people in their houses, they couldn't do that, so the houses were all destroyed. And then if you come here to Lima, Ohio, it is hard to find a house that was built before 1920. Most of them were built in the 20s. We were trying to rebuild, obviously, the city after it had gone through the flood. But very rare to find something built before the 1920s. After the decline of business here in Lima, John Dillinger and his gang began operations here. According to the Cincinnati Enquirer, Lima was a haven for gangsters in the 1920s and 30s. Some of the historical buildings downtown still are set up the way that the gangsters had them, with the speakeasies and like the secret doors and things, so that they could keep things under wraps, and they had opportunity to shoot the cops and stuff as they would come. The Dillinger gang ran this town and everyone in it. If people had a problem with it, they were better off to keep their mouths closed, according to Randy McNutt. Finding dead bodies behind dumpsters and car bombings were not uncommon here in Lima. This town was then, and still is sometimes, referred to as Little Chicago. One of the more famous happenings around that time period was the Underworld shooting, which some of you may have seen the movie Public Enemies, about John Dillinger. He went up about 20 miles north of here to Bluffton, Ohio, and robbed a bank, him and his gang. And then our sheriff here, Jess Sarber at the time, caught John Dillinger and put him in jail. So then shortly after that, 3 of the gang members, Dillinger's gang, came to the jailhouse and told Sarber that they were from Indiana State Penitentiary, here to pick up Dillinger to take him back over to Indiana State Penitentiary. Sarber didn't believe them and asked them for identification, and at that time they went ahead and just pulled out their guns and shot Sarber. And his wife was in the jailhouse at the time, so she gave them the keys to the jail cell, and they were able to get Dillinger out, and he escaped from the jail. Sarber then died that night, and that was a pretty big story for, I guess, a lot of places. Dillinger was a very notorious gangster. This city has been steadily declining then since the 1980s here. We've had lost about 11,000 residents, and in the early 1990s there were recorded about 48,000 residents here, and now we have about 37,000 residents here. We've lost A lot of businesses, things still are closing down. But on the plus side, there are other things coming into town. So the hope is to revive downtown. According to the Cincinnati Enquirer, downtown would look familiar to a gun-toting time traveler from 1929, since nothing has changed much. Here is a picture of our downtown, actually. We have here the courthouse, and there is the jailhouse, and this looks just like it does here in the picture. Now, if you would go downtown, I believe that there is a stoplight here on this corner. The streets are paved now, and there are not really horses anymore, but otherwise, the picture, it still looks just like this now. Another picture is here, the train station, which is something that we were really famous for, was our trains. We used to have a lot of train travel going through, and now we don't have any travel going through. We do have a lot of trains due to the business here, you know, bringing in goods and taking out goods from the plants and the factories, but this is no longer a train station, or it's not used as a train station. It looks just like this, but it is actually an office building for the Lima Water Works company, so it's just a water company now. But there is hope. Currently, there is a private project of about $3 million to open up the old Opera House that Benjamin Brote had built originally, and that is according to the Enquirer. They also just finished a $6.5 million remodel of downtown sidewalks and streets, so it looks nicer now. It's easier to walk on. People have been buying up some of the abandoned buildings due to the promise from Rhodes State College to come here and build a medical building right in the middle of downtown, where they will have medical students living 500 dorm rooms down right in the middle of downtown. So there is promise to bring a lot of new business down there, and so some people are buying up some of the abandoned buildings, and they're trying to revive them, you know, remodel and make them into something that could be profitable. Whether Lima will ever see its glory days again, we hope so. I would love to see it, but time will only tell.